end of course test review notes. What I've done here is I've gone through and made it to look very similar to what you would have on note cards. We did this at the first part of the semester for midterm. If this is second semester, well, then you know what I'm talking about. If not, that might sound a little silly, but basically these are just very to the point notes. Okay. First off, we talked about Virginia. Jamestown is the first successful English colony led by John Smith, John Rolfe. As you see laid down here later, John Rolfe plays a key role into tobacco. Bacon's Rebellion, named after Nathaniel Bacon. Nathaniel Bacon is a farmer in Jamestown who is basically looking to get a foot into Jamestown as far as the politics go, but also to gain his property. What we know about Bacon's Rebellion, what's important to know about it, is the unequal distribution of land. Okay, what that basically means is that we are seeing that Europe, primarily England in this case, has a hierarchy to where the landowners are the voters. The landowners are the ones who are in control of government. We are seeing that it's very hard and difficult for the average person, the average farmer, to get involved and to have the same rights. Nathaniel Bacon leads the revolt against Jamestown. You'll also notice that through here I've abbreviated some, again, to try to keep it short. But Bacon's revolt is unsuccessful as, say, like a military venture, but at the same time it is successful in the sense that it shows an awareness. It shows it's not the same as the old world. And we will see, especially as we get through taxation again, that that's very prevalent. Okay, tobacco. Tobacco is a cash crop, a crop grown solely for profit. This is what saves Jamestown. Cultivated by John Rolfe, who somehow gets his hand on some Spanish seed, which was actually punishable by death at the time if Spain knew that you had done this or had sold it, because they cornered the market. So cultivate is basically just another word to say that they were able to get it to grow. Okay, so that economically saves Jamestown. We also looked at Powhatan, the chief of chief of the Powhatan tribe, pardon me, but also the father of Pocahontas, if you remember us talking about the truths and falseness of that story. Resisted Jamestown settlement. We see a series of conflicts that emerge from that. The story of John Smith is true in the sense that he is saved by Pocahontas, but the love story obviously is false, but that's just trivia. King Philip's War is an example of a Puritan war to take native land or to expand, and the natives' resistance to that. Metacom is also known as King Philip by the English. Metacom is the leader of King Philip's War, hence the name Philip. He is also killed by a praying Indian. A praying Indian is one who we see that has converted from Christianity, or to Christianity from their tribal ways. The witch trials, Salem, Massachusetts. This is basically an extreme Puritan reaction to losing their charter. They lose their charter before the Glorious Revolution we talked about in notes, but also too it's a time to where they are seeing, I guess you could say, a famine to a certain degree. Their cattle is dying. Negative things have been happening to the Puritans, and they're searching for a way to figure out, why is this happening? Why is all these bad things happening to us? So there has to be an explanation. So at the time they come to the conclusion that there must be evil amongst them. And if there is evil amongst them, we have to do something to get rid of it. So this is where we get the witch hunt aspect to it. Okay, innocent people being killed or accused of being witches goes all the way up to even the governor's wife. Quakers. Okay, Quakers is the flip side of Puritans. Okay, Puritans are very strict in the way that they went about their life. I'll mention that again in the New England colonies here in a second. But Quakers is basically the polar opposite. They are very, I guess we would say today, down to earth. They're very ordinary and common. They believe that their worship service is come as you are. There's no sense in hiding. God knows who you are. He knows what you look like. There's no putting on a fake face. There's no formal ministers. Everyone shares in that experience together, and that Christ or God is within you. Pennsylvania, which means Penn's Woods, which was given to William Penn as a gift from the king due to his father's allegiance during the English Revolution or Civil War. Pennsylvania is also what we call or known as the Holy Experiment. The Holy Experiment is basically this attempt to try to show that everyone is common, everyone is together, everybody can work together. Hence the reason why when we see the middle colonies of the diversity, okay, they're very ordinary, very common, common as in common folk, not as in common that they're everywhere common. Okay, we also looked at three different types of colonies or the division of colonies: New England, Middle, and Southern. And these guys are very much geographically laid out as they are, I guess you could say, socially. Okay, and hopefully that makes sense again when I go through the middle colonies. New England is dominated by Puritans, like I previously mentioned, very strict. As it says here, very educated. Bible is the center of their literature, obviously, but also too that as their teaching tool. So not only are you becoming educated or literate, you're also being indoctrinated into the faith as well. Church and worship and spiritual life center is the center of their life. It is from the construction of their towns to the way they behave, the things they do, the way they act. Okay, people in this area are also known to be shipbuilders. They're involved in commerce. Their latitudes, even that of Europe, so it's a very easy route. Middle colonies. Middle colonies are in the middle geographically, obviously, but at the same time, too, they're kind of in the middle socially. So hopefully you'll make that connection with southern colonies. It is extremely diverse. Okay, Quakers is a big part of that. That kind of holy experiment of everyone coming together, living together, and sharing. Um, you have natives, you have Africans, you have English, Irish, Welsh. I think there was Germanic, Polish. There was all kinds of different lists of different groups of people that we talked about in notes. Southern colonies. Southern colonies are very sparse population, very spread out, much smaller than the other two. No large towns. Savannah, maybe Augusta, and Charleston are probably about the three. And Savannah and Charleston being key ports, which also we see the importance of those in the American Revolution as well as the American Civil War. Agricultural based. Okay, we're not to the age of cotton yet. The cash crop is still tobacco. Okay, but that's how they make their life. Little stress on education does not mean that they're not educated. It doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. What it does mean, though, is that there's not a stress on formal education. Their education is, how do I survive? How do I live? Mercantilism, sending raw materials back to the mother country to be mass produced. This is basically what colonization is all about: sending those materials back to a mother country to be produced and resold at a profit. Middle passage of slaves from Africa to the Americas. We talked about the triangle trade, and the bottom part of that triangle coming from Africa to the Americas, being Central America, Latin America, South America, North America, and the Caribbean, is a journey that cost a lot of lives. And we looked at the example of the kind of packing slip that we looked at with the political cartoon, I guess you could call it, as far as how many people were put onto these ships to try to make profit, because they know that a large portion of them are going to die on the way over. Okay, Great Awakening. Great Awakening is a revival. It is Puritan driven. It is basically a step to go against this age of enlightenment that we have come into, where scientific reasoning goes into explaining the phenomena of life. And this is basically looking at the American world and saying, hey, things have changed. We've got to get back to our roots. A good example of that is Jonathan Edwards, who is a Puritan minister, also a very key prominent political figure in Puritan America, in his famous speech and or sermon, In the Hands of an Angry God, where he talks about hell, fire, brimstone, damnation, and all the the negative things that happen to you because of your sinful life. Okay, Revolution. French and Indian War, we see the emergence of the figure of George Washington as a Virginia militia leader. He begins the war basically because of his issue. I don't want to call it an assault because of the issue just outside Fort Duquesne in what is today Pittsburgh. And because of that scouting mission that's sent out, they run into the French. A skirmish breaks out. Some French soldiers and officers are captured. And because of that action, we see a retaliation after some of Washington's native allies have scalped and killed a couple of officers. A man is able to escape, get word back, and this whole battle ensues from that point. Okay, but trying to be shorter about this, what we need to know is it's the French and their Indian allies versus the British and their colonies. Okay, the British went out. The final battle we see the Battle of Quebec. That leads to the Treaty of Paris, 1763. Borders will now be to the west the Mississippi River, to the south the northern border of Florida, to the north the southern border of Canada, and that is all controlled by the British now. Kind of skipping forward a little bit, we get into the Stamp Act. Stamp Act is a direct tax. By purchasing this piece, the sticker, this stamp, this piece of paper that has to be placed onto any legal document to show that you have paid your tax, is a direct tax to those citizens. Okay, we do see that it is repealed. A lot of it is repealed because of over here on the other side of the actions of the Sons of Liberty. We see also the emergence of the Stamp Act Congress, where we see the colonies unite to try to fight against this. And because the fact that it's repealed will lead to also more pushback, and we'll see that the colonies are really bearing down and going to make an effort, and they see that, hey, when we push, the British back down. Okay, intolerable acts is just another nickname for coercive acts. This occurs after the Boston Tea Party. It includes three major items, or three things. Close Boston Harbor until all tea is paid for. General Thomas Gage will be your new governor, basically meaning that it is martial law. We have taken the hero of Pontiac's rebellion, and now we've placed him as governor in control of Massachusetts. Okay, the Quartering Act existed before, but previously the Quartering Act did not include in private homes. What it did call for was basically the building of barracks or dormitories. Now it will be in your home. Sons and Daughters of Liberty. We talked about it as Sons of Liberty, but I've included the daughters part because in end of course test or EOCTs in the past have included the daughter's name, and I didn't want that to throw you off. Organization fighting British taxation. Tar and feathering we looked at as far as a method or a tool of intimidation, pushing for independence. Committee of Correspondence is a way for the colonies to communicate with each other and to pass on information such as boycotts. Common Sense is a pamphlet written by Thomas Paine. In it, he speaks of inalienable rights, rights that cannot be taken away, that will be shadowed in the Declaration of Independence. Social contract. Social contract theory is a theory of John Locke, who is a political scientist / philosopher, and he talks about that the people of a country or government have a social contract, if you want to call it so, or quote unquote, that basically say that the government has certain requirements or certain actions that they have to take in order to protect its people. And if they violate that, or they are not protecting their people or doing what's best for their people, then the people have the right to break that contract. Okay, so there we have a call for a break from Britain. Declaration of Independence states the independence of America from Great Britain. Thomas Jefferson is given credit for have penned the Declaration of Independence. He's on a committee with, I believe it's 5 other people. But we oftentimes give him credit because he is the kind of the secretary of the group, if you want to think of it in that way, like when you do group work. But he also injects a lot of his own philosophies and thoughts into here, going back to Montesquieu, to John Locke, and some of those social contract type theories. And we also use the analogy of it being like a breakup letter. It's a list of charges against the king. Here's the reason why I don't want to be with you anymore. 1, 2, 3, and so on. I believe we ended up counting up to 47 charges against the king. Okay, so we have declared our independence. That actually occurs after the war has started with Concord and Lexington. But some of the major events we see, Saratoga is the turning point of the war. It's the turning point of the war because the French come on as an ally and a much needed navy. The Battle of Trenton. Washington crosses the Delaware River. It's a surprise attack on the Hessians. It is American victory. It's a morale booster. This is also where we see the famous image of Washington crossing the Delaware. Battle of Yorktown is the final battle to where the Americans defeat the British along with the help of the French, led by the Marquis de Lafayette, and Washington will defeat Cornwallis at that peninsula in Virginia. Okay, so to end the war, the Treaty of Paris, 1783. British recognize the U.S. as a nation. Of course, when it's not the U.S. yet, quite yet, but it's on its way. So America as its own independent nation. The British will leave the United States, and they are to take all British supporters with them. They keep their British territory, which is Canada. We know that all that isn't going to happen because that's what leads us to War of 1812. Okay, Constitution, Articles of Confederation. First form of government. It is weak. The reason why it's weak is because we're not able to collect taxes. There's no executive branch. Shays Rebellion. shows the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation. It shows it's weak because these farmers resist to pay these federal taxes that supposedly exist, but they say that you can't do that. We just fought a war over taxes. There's nothing in these articles that say that we have to, and they are right. So that leads the government to basically form a constitution that will be able to do so. Within this, we see two parties emerge. First, the Federalists, who believe in strong central government. They favor a new constitution that gives more central government the authority to do things such as collect taxes. The Anti-Federalists, they feel that we should have less federal or national government and more state and local authority. So they are not in favor of the Constitution at the present time. Not a Constitution, but Constitution in its form. Checks and balances. Checks and balances keep branches from getting too strong. Powers are only have certain branches of levels in government that can do certain things. It's something that we're battling with today, executive branch versus legislative branch and so on, and it's put into the Constitution to try to limit those things. The executive branch is led by the president and the vice president. Just a couple things, there's many things, but they name federal judges. We mentioned that one now because it does play a key role into some things later into our U.S. history story. Also, too, the veto legislation. So that's a check, for example, against the legislative branch. Judicial branch is to rule laws not being constitutional or not, and basically saying, for example, Marbury versus Madison, where it says Congress does have the authority to make laws, judicial branch does have the authority to interpret the Constitution, so on and so forth. Legislative branch, they make the laws. A check on the executive branch is to override vetoes. They approve federal judges, which is a check against the executive branch again. Now, in this, we started getting into how are we as citizens going to be represented in Congress. Example was the Virginia Plan. Favor large, wealthy states. It favors wealthy states because Virginia is proposing that the more people you have, population, and the more wealth you give to the national fund, you should have more seats in Congress, which also means more power because of more votes, more say. Bicameral, two lawmaking bodies based on population. The other is New Jersey Plan. This is to favor the small states. It favors small states because smaller states would have, population-wise, would have just as much say as a larger state. Okay, that's what based on statehood means. Unicameral is one lawmaking body, which means it would be more impactful. The two sides agree in what's become or called the Great Compromise, also known as the Connecticut Plan. In that, we have our modern Congress, bicameral House of Representatives, House of Representatives, which is based on population, and Senate, which is based on statehood. From that, we get immediately into the slavery debate. 3/5 compromise, counting 3 out of 5 slaves into the population. The South is saying, hey, look, we have much less population than you of the North. That's not right. That's not fair. The North compromises and says, okay, we'll count 3 out of 5 slaves. That should help balance things out. Bill of Rights. Now, in order to get people to agree with this new Constitution and to ratify it, the Anti-Federalists, led by Jefferson, decided to come up with a Bill of Rights that the Federalists eventually will agree to. It's a list of basic rights guaranteed by the Constitution. This is your first 10 amendments to the Constitution.